If, oh, you guys saw that? If you're looking to do a full white build with one of AMD's new 7000 series chips, you're gonna find your motherboard choices rather limited. Admittedly, what your motherboard or any component looks like is probably the least important spec. But with build prices skyrocketing, you can't really blame someone if they go for not just performance, but the actual aesthetics of their build to make something a showpiece in their office or their media room. That brings us to today's review of ASUS's B650E-A Rogue Strix Gaming Wi-Fi motherboard. If you're going for a full white build, this is one of the few choices that you actually have. But does it offer the performance to actually be the centerpiece of whatever your new rig is gonna be? As always, let's take a second to look at this board up close while we jump into some of the marketing materials provided by ASUS before we dive into our thoughts on whether or not this is the right board for you. The Rogue Strix B650-A gaming Wi-Fi comes equipped with potent performance and thermal prowess in a fresh-looking package. And by fresh, they mean virtually identical to every -A board they've released for the past 3 years. Robust delivery is cooled with thick heat sinks against a black PCB. The board features 12-in-2 teamed power solution rated at 60 amps per stage. It supports 4-DIMM dual-channel DDR5 up to 6400, 2 PCIe 4x16, and 2 PCIe 4x1 expansion slots, as well as 3 M.2 storage slots, 2 Gen 4 and 1 Gen 5. For cooling, we have substantial heat sinks over the VRM as well as all 3 M.2 slots. For connectivity, the board offers a full complement of internal headers for your front I/O, cooling, and RGB solutions. The rear I/O comes packed with both HDMI and DisplayPort out, 2 USB Type-C, 3 USB 3 Type-A, and 4 USB 2.0 ports, as well as Wi-Fi 6E, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and a full complement of audio jacks. The first thing I want to touch on is the board's power delivery. With 8+4 power connectors and 12-in-2 power phases rated at 60 amps, the first question you might have is, can this board actually power my new build? And to be fair, that's a legitimate question. With a lot of the B650 boards out there offering 14 power stages or more, and even things way more excessive in the X670 boards like 20-in-2, you might be wondering, can this thing actually handle AMD's 7000 series power-hungry chips? Well, that's something that I've touched on in previous reviews, where power phases are an area where manufacturers tend to overbuild. It's an easy way to price up a board without actually impacting the manufacturer's overall BOM cost. So I'm happy to say, with 12 power phases rated at 60 amps, this board is going to offer more than enough power to handle even the beefiest of AMD's 7000 series chips. Now, if you are a hardcore overclocker and you're rolling with something like the 7900 or 7950X, this might not be the board for you. However, let's be honest, if that is you, you're probably not looking at a B series board to begin with. You're more than likely going to go with one of the higher tier X670E options. The board offers more than enough power to handle a 7950X, as well as fairly substantial heat sinks over the VRM to help with cooling. And to be clear, if you are running a 7950X and you're not one of those hardcore overclockers, you're probably better off dropping that chip into eco mode or running a lower power custom tuning like one of these here to get the best results and stay on your efficiency curve. Looking at PCIe compatibility, we have two PCIe 4.0 slots, one of which takes advantage of ASUS's quick release feature to help you with installing new GPUs or reseating yours. Again, that's not a necessary feature, but it is a great quality of life addition to have. The board also has two 1X slots for those of us that might be still taking advantage of those. I know we don't see them used as often as we did in the past, but it is nice to have. One key note here is the second PCIe 4 slot does share bandwidth with the third M.2 slot on this board. So that is definitely something to keep in mind if you're one of the few people that is going to utilize all three M.2 slots as well as both your PCIe 4 expansion slots. Now, I know that doesn't apply to most of us, but for the few people that do, it is a key thing that you want to keep in mind whenever you're looking at a motherboard. On the topic of M.2 storage, we have three M.2 slots, with the main slot being rated at PCIe 5.0 with a fairly substantial heatsink, and the other two slots at 4.0. This combined with the main GPU PCIe expansion slot rated at 4.0 is one of those things that at first might seem like a drawback, but it's actually a non-factor. With even the beefiest GPUs like the 4090 only taking advantage of PCIe 4, combined with the fact that while Gen 5 M.2 storage is starting to become a thing, it is still insanely expensive and doesn't really offer any real world benefits that you're going to notice on day-to-day usage. Again, it's another one of those areas where you may see some other boards that will hail this as future-proofing, but really it's just an inexpensive way for the manufacturer to drive up the price of the motherboard at retail. The board does offer 4DIMM DDR5 support, as all AMD 7000 series motherboards have to, rated at 6400 MTS. With the sweet spot for AMD 7000 series chips being right at 6000, again, this is something that more than meets your needs for daily usage. Moving into the rear I/O, we do see a full complement of audio jacks coupled with the ALC 4080 codec. We also have a DisplayPort out as well as HDMI out, two Type-Cs, a complement of USB Type-A's, more than enough to handle any peripheral you want, as well as BIOS flashback. One thing notably missing when comparing this board to its X670E bigger brother is a clear CMOS button. Again, for most of us, that's not going to really come into play, but for you more adventurous types that might get into a little trouble in the BIOS sometimes, that's something missing that's worth keeping in mind. I am still wondering when, if ever, manufacturers are going to give us more Type-C ports on the back. With more and more peripherals switching over to Type-C, it's only a matter of time before the standard one or two Type-C ports on the rear I/O just doesn't cut it anymore. Internally, there are more than enough headers to cover whatever type of RGB, cooling, or internal storage design you ultimately decide to go with, so there's no worries there. Finally, on the topic of build quality, the board offers a 6-layer PCB. While definitely more than adequate, a lot of the other options in this price range are offering at least an 8-layer PCB. It does come equipped with substantial heat sinks over the VRM, as well as all three M.2 slots to make sure your cooling is adequate to exceptional. The overall design and aesthetic of the board is very nice and more than adequate to fit any all-white or Oreo cookie style build you might be going with. Ultimately, would I recommend this motherboard? Well, if you're looking to do an all-white build, admittedly, your choices are pretty limited with what you go with. But I can't help but feel like for this board, ASUS is making you pay up a little for the color and the style versus the actual specs that the board gives you. I do think if you're gonna go with a white aesthetic, you get a little more value going with something like the X670E bigger brother version of this board versus this one itself. However, if you're on a budget and you're dead set on going with an all-white build, this wouldn't be a bad option, though it may not ultimately offer the best value for your money. It's a budget B series shootout. I have 3 of the most popular B series AM5 boards, and we're gonna figure out which, if any of these, are worthy of your money. With the X3D variants of the AMD 7000 series dropping now, we figured it would be the perfect time to go through some of the budget B series boards and see which one reigns supreme. We have 3 boards here, from the more budget conscious B650 Tomahawk from MSI and the AORS Pro AX from Gigabyte, all the way up to the might as well be an X670E priced ASUS ROG Strix B650E-E. We'll even throw in some potential system builds after we review each one and link all the parts down in the description. Now, I want to do each one of these boards justice, so we're going to split this video into 3 parts. And for this first one, we'll be going through the ASUS board. And as always, while I get this thing unboxed, let's dive into what ASUS wants you to hear about it, and then we'll cut through what actually matters and what's just their marketing BS. ASUS tells us to take your build from B tier to S with the B650E-E, PCIe 5.0, and DDR5. Propel your rig into the future. Innovative Q design features make system setup a breeze. All of its perks are backed by a tenacious power solution and hefty heat sinks, blah, 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 blah. So the board features 16-2 power stages with dual 8-pin power connectors, DDR5 600, supports up to 4 M.2 slots, 2 of which are PCIe 5.0, as well as 2 PCIe 5.0 X16 expansion slots and 1 PCIe 4.0. The rear I/O is also very robust, providing full audio jacks, as well as DisplayPort out, HDMI, BIOS flashback, and a clear CMOS, along with a host of USB connections. So I'll just say it outright. This board is basically a mid-tier X670E board in all but name, and yeah, that also includes price, coming in at $350 US and even more in other parts of the world. But can ASUS deliver on that high price tag? Is this board worth it? Well, I guess that depends on what you're looking for. If you're trying to build a high-end spec'd out rig, but you want to shave a few dollars where you can in places that doesn't matter, then yeah, this might be a good fit for you. And I'm not just saying that. We're actually going to hang on to this board and drop it into our test rig for some upcoming tests that we're doing. So first thing let's look at is the power and cooling. This is an area that this board definitely doesn't scrimp, with 16-2 power stages rated at 70 amps apiece and dual 8-pin CPU connectors. This is definitely going to be able to deliver whatever power you need for any of the higher end chips. In fact, that's one of the main reasons we're going to be using this board in our test rig, as we'll be dropping an overclock 7950X in there to do some AIO torture testing and some videos we have coming up. It also has a massive VRM heatsink. I know it's kind of hard to see on the video, but I can tell you it's right up there with the ROG Strix X670E-A that I'm using in my editing rig right now as far as cooling, so I don't think that's going to be an issue or anything you'll need to worry about. And speaking of heat sinks, we also see substantial heat sinks over all 4 of the M.2 slots, including both Gen 5 and both Gen 4s, which is something that you don't see on every one of these budget, and that word doesn't mean what it used to, but you don't often see it on these budget boards where they have a good heatsink over every single M.2 slots. Most of the manufacturers assume if you're buying and building a budget machine, you're probably not loading it out with 4 or 5 M.2 storage devices. Finally, if you've seen some of my other motherboard reviews, you know one of my biggest pet peeves is manufacturers scrimping on the I/O to save a few dollars. ASUS does not cut any corners here, with more than enough USB 3.2 Type A ports to power any peripheral you may want to connect to it, as well as 2 Type-C ports, BIOS flashback, and a clear CMOS button for you more adventurous types that might get into a little bit of trouble in the BIOS. So in my opinion, is this board worth it? Well, the answer is yes and no. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're going for a budget gaming build, this probably isn't the board for you. There's a lot of other less expensive B650 boards, those we'll talk about later, that might fit your needs better. But if you're making a high-end rig and you want to shave maybe $100 here or there off the price, this thing comes in lower than most of the X670E boards, and it could be a good fit for you. So what I'll do is I'm going to put together a potential build, not recommended or anything, just a list of parts that I think would be a good fit for this board, and I'll link those in the description below. And I would love for you guys to check everything out. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Do you think ASUS has justified that $350 price tag, or do you think maybe they're just trying to capitalize where they can? Welcome back for part 3 of our budget B-series board Am5 battle. Today we're going to be taking a look at MSI's B650 Tomahawk. This board comes in at the lowest retail cost of any of the 3 we reviewed so far, at $230 US, give or take depending on what retailer you find it at. But the question here isn't about the price. The question's about the value. Do you get enough out of this board for that price, given there are some features that you're going to be sacrificing? As always, let's jump right in and hear what MSI has to say while we get this thing unboxed, and then we'll come back and maybe filter through some of the marketing BS and give you our actual opinions of the board. MSI is a little more sparse in their description than some of the other ones on their site, but they want you to unite as one. The Mag series fights alongside gamers in the pursuit of honor, whatever that means. So the board obviously supports AMD 7000 series chips and supports DDR5 up to 6400 megahertz for overclocking. Though if you're in a budget board like this, I would say there's no point in going above 6000. It has a premium thermal solution, 2.5 gig LAN, and Lightning M.2, which is funny because it's only Gen 4 and they don't actually offer any Gen 5 on here. Honestly, guys, I think that's enough from MSI. I'd rather just dive in and actually take a look at this board. So right away, let's address the elephant in the room. This board lacks any PCIe 5 support. That includes the expansion slots and the M.2. And while that's not going to hamper you with any current generation products, it could be something that holds you back down the road whenever you start looking to upgrade. Another important distinction is this board only sports a 6-layer PCB versus 8 for the other 2 we looked at. But hey, I mean, if you're going to shave $150 off the price, you got to be willing to make some cuts somewhere, right? At least one of the areas they didn't make a cut is in power delivery. So the board sports 14 2-in-1 power stages, which is less than the other 2 boards. However, they are rated at 80 amps each, has a fairly substantial cooling setup over the VRMs to help everything run smooth, and dual 8-pin connectors. Looking at you, Gigabyte, if they can rock dual 8 pins on a board that costs $50 less and delivers more power, I'm not sure why you couldn't do it on yours. Like I said, it does have substantial cooling and heat sinks, but I will say, again, it's one of those things that's hard to pick up on video, but it does lag behind the other 2 boards. The VRM heat sinks are not nearly as substantial, and only 2 of the 3 M.2 slots are actually even covered, with one of them just being exposed. Will that be an issue for you? At this ultra budget level, it's that word again, ultra budget on a $230 board, But at this ultra budget level, you gotta be honest with yourself. Are you actually dropping 3 high-end M.2s in there, and does it really matter? So again, it could be an area that's worth sacrificing a little bit of a feature for some price savings. One area where I do think this board punches above its weight is in the rear I/O. So we see a substantial number of USB ports, more than you could possibly need. They do have a display port out along with HDMI out, as well as a full complement of audio jacks. Again, looking at you, Gigabyte, if they can do it at less money, why can't you? There is only one Type-C, which I've said it over and over, and I'll say it again, and I'll always say it. Huge pet peeve of mine. All peripherals are moving towards Type-C. It's only a matter of time before that's the dominant connector out there, and manufacturers need to be thinking ahead, especially if you're buying into like the first generation of the Am5 platform, where you're probably going to hang on to this for a little while and maybe drop another CPU in it down the road. So in my opinion, overall, is this board worth it? I say probably not. This is one that I'm going to stay away from. It offers a solid feature set for the price. However, unless you're really trying to squeeze your pennies, and if you are, you can get more features for about the same amount of money from other manufacturers. But I would say it's worth investing a few extra dollars to get maybe a little bit better board that's going to offer you some more future proofing. But if you are dead set on this, if you're an MSI fanboy, if you absolutely have to have this board, it's the only one that you can get your hands on. Again, I'll link some potential parts and a build down in the description below, but overall, I would encourage you maybe consider the Gigabyte board, or if you have a little bit extra money, the ASUS boards that we've previously reviewed. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that video, don't forget to check out one of these. Make sure you like, subscribe, check out some of our other content, and as always, thanks for watching.